Ladies and gents, welcome back to another IGTG Real Lil TV production. In this series, we've done a good job covering the sport of boxing and its relationship with organized crime from the 50s all the way to the present day. However, us being in the month of February, and that being Black History Month, I've decided to pivot this series in a slightly different direction. In Black culture, we have lots of iconic public figures, athletes, activists, and artists. But in my opinion, two of the most influential people in our culture are Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali is known arguably as the greatest boxer of all time, while Malcolm X, along with Martin Luther King, will go down as the greatest civil activist in the Black community in history. Together, both Ali and Malcolm would form a brotherhood that would ultimately be infiltrated by interior and exterior forces. In 1960, Cassius Clay, at the time, went to the Rome Games to compete in the light heavyweight division. He was an 18-year-old prospect with a great amateur's resume and was thought to be a rising star in the sport. After being adverse to flying on a plane because he was scared of heights, Clay was finally convinced by his mentor and trainer, Joe Martin, to harp on the opportunity. Clay brought his smooth-talking personality with him, along with a parachute, and started to make his presence felt upon arrival. Clay won his opening fight by a stoppage in the second round, followed by a points win over Gennady Statkov, who had won a gold medal years back. Clay ended up winning the gold, which jump-started his start to stardom as he returned back to America with gold around his neck. Clay immediately turned pro and was building his equity with stoppages, TKO wins, showing his speed, footwork, and power. However, in June of 1962, Cassius Clay answered a call that would change his life. He was invited along with his brother to a Muslim rally in Detroit. Sam Saxton, a Black Muslim and a friend of Clay, drove the brothers from Louisville to Detroit. When they arrived at this event, Clay was accompanied by his friend to meet the great Malcolm, and Clay introduced himself, and Malcolm was instantly intrigued by his charm. Malcolm X was a Black Muslim activist who articulated the ideas of self-defense and sparked a revolutionist mindset. He became the spokesperson of the Nation of Islam during the 50s and 60s. Malcolm would refer to whites as devils, as he did not believe the civil rights goal of racial integration through nonviolence was realistic.
Called people like Martin Luther King, who just got a Nobel Peace Prize, an Uncle Tom. Is this correct, first?
Well, I'd rather say that in the States, there's a law that has recently been passed, or a decision handed down by the court, wherein if you call someone an Uncle Tom, they can sue you for libel.
Well,
so I never refer to them as Uncle Toms. I would say that Uncle Martin is my friend.
Uncle Martin is your friend, yet you would disagree with his approach to what he wants to accomplish.
Definitely. If his approach would bring about what the Black man in America needs to completely eliminate the problem that we have, I would say well and good. But I very much doubt that anyone who adopts the approach that Martin Luther King has been teaching to our people in that country can point to any meaningful gains that has actually served to solve the problem.
It was Malcolm who gave Cassius Clay the true grounding in his faith. In a sense, Malcolm became a mentor for Cassius Clay. In January 1964, Clay was training in Miami for his fight against Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship and was surprised by a visit from Malcolm X, who was accompanied by his wife and 3 children. What seemed to be a great confidence boost for Cassius Clay was looked upon as a concern by the guys around Clay. The people around Clay believed that his association with the Nation of Islam wasn't a great thing for his career. One promoter threatened to cut off the highly anticipated fight. This whole conflict was going on with a bout against the highly favored Sonny Liston on the horizon. Yes, Clay was an 8-1 underdog heading into the bout. Liston was considered to be the most dominant fighter in the world, with back-to-back round 1 stoppages over Floyd Patterson to take the title. Malcolm, who agreed to leave his town, came back to support Clay on fight night. The fight went on as planned, and Ali showed his dazzling speed and constant movement, which proved to be too much as Sonny quit in the 7th round. After the fight, Malcolm spent the night reflecting with Ali in a hotel room, joined by singer Sam Cooke and pro football star Jim Brown. Many people called this meeting the Black Avengers, but conversations were kept in-house and had become fictionalized like the movie One Night in Miami. What we do know is that the morning after this private meeting, Cassius Clay publicly confirmed his ties to the Nation of Islam.
Why do you insist on being called Muhammad Ali now?
That's the name given to me by my leading teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's my original name. That's a black man name. Cassius Clay was my slave name. I'm no longer a slave.
What does it mean?
Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high.
Then to Islam in the first instance.
The Muslim religion?
Yes.
Is the true teachings of Elijah Muhammad right there in America, in the power structure. Nobody will challenge him. And the history of ourselves, the history of our true religion, our nationality, our names. See, we don't have our names, you know. I know how proud you all are, proud of your names. See, Chinese have names like Chang Chong, Lu Qian. This is Islamic teachings. Russians have names like Kosygin or Khrushchev. You have names like O'Connor or Grady or Kennedy. And Africans had names like Lumumba, Nkrumah. And Jews got names like Weinstein and Goldberg. And Italians got names like Dundee and Benvenuti and Marciano. But we have names like Grady and Clay and Hawkins and Smith and Jones and Johnson, but we are black.
These are the slave names.
Yeah, so when I heard this, I knew it was the truth, it's history. So Muhammad Ali is a beautiful black name of our ancestors. So when I heard this, I just had to walk out of the church and Christianity because they never taught us our true knowledge.
Obviously, Ali's conversion came with blowback from white America and even some civil rights leaders. Nevertheless, Ali continued to walk in his faith while proceeding with his boxing career. Ali had an immediate rematch with Sonny Liston, in which Ali floored Liston with a short, choppy right hand to the head, creating one of the most iconic photos in sports history, which showed Ali standing over Liston. As we pointed out in Fugazi Boxing Tales 1, the ending result of that fight went beyond a phantom punch, but rather something more underhand. Liston had ties to organized crime, which around that time was infested in the sport of boxing. Most people believe that Liston's unpaid debt to the mob who managed his career was the reason he took the dive, but his assistant trainer years later came out and said that Liston told him he threw the fight for fear of being murdered by black Muslims. Whether it was mob involvement or the fear of being murdered by Muslims, one thing we have clear evidence on is that the NOI, the Nation of Islam, now expanded behind prominent figures, Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, became a serious threat to the establishment. The FBI monitored Muhammad Ali's ties to the Nation of Islam, which were backed up by FBI documents. The documents show that the FBI had informants close to the nation to let them know the details of Ali's involvement with the nation. The FBI also were interested in any developments on the possibility that Ali would be drafted in the Army and if he would deny a draft call-up, which ended up being the case on March 9th, 1966 at the height of the war. Ali's draft status made him eligible to fight in the Vietnam War. By 1968, 19,560 Americans had died in the Vietnam War, and another 16,502 would die that year alone. Ali refused to be inducted in the U.S. Army, citing his religious beliefs as the primary reason. On June 20th, 1967, Ali was convicted of draft evasion and sentenced to 5 years in prison with a $10,000 fine. Ali appealed up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in 1971, his appeal was finally overturned. Now, let's go back 8 years to November 20th, 1963. President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, as he was on a campaigning trip for the upcoming 1964 election. A day after Kennedy's assassination, Malcolm X was asked to comment on the matter by U.S. TV reporters, and he informed reporters saying, "Chickens coming home to roost." That statement became a very controversial one, resulting in Malcolm X being suspended from the nation, mainly because Elijah Muhammad told his ministers to not comment on the matter.
Malcolm X, you were involved in a controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
They were distorted?
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate.
But
only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said. What would I look like saying that I'm glad the president was killed?
Malcolm, this was your first public statement in that 90-day period, is it not?
First time I opened up my mouth in 90 days. That's why I'm talking so fast and so hearty.
This suspension became the beginning of Malcolm's split with the nation. It had become evident a while back, according to sources close to Malcolm, that Elijah Muhammad grew jealous of Malcolm, who was becoming bigger than the nation itself. He knew Elijah Muhammad was untrustworthy, as he had adulterous affairs with his secretaries who became pregnant. In fact, 2 of his young secretaries sued him for paternity, which sparked a national scandal. Malcolm conducted his own investigation and found the rumors to be true, and that his wife was even offered a secretarial job by Muhammad 2 days after she and Malcolm married. Malcolm was horrified to find out that so many girls and young women were being taken advantage of by the person who became like a father to him. Malcolm confronted Muhammad, suggesting that he tell the congregation about the pregnancies, but Muhammad was not keen on doing so. And eventually, Malcolm acknowledged the scandal before the Congression as well as the press. An irate Muhammad banned Malcolm from preaching for 90 days, and in March of 1964, Malcolm X announced his resignation from the Nation of Islam. But this wasn't a friendly split at all, as it was alleged that Elijah Muhammad wanted Malcolm dead and assigned someone to kill him, but the individual had lots of respect for Malcolm and told him of the plot instead. Malcolm would soon create his own organization called the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. The split from the nation would fracture some of Malcolm's great relationships with notable individuals. In wake of the development, Ali decided to abandon his spiritual advisor and friend Malcolm. But not only was Malcolm separated from Muhammad Ali, he was separated from another prominent figure, which included one of the most notorious gang leaders in the country, Bumpy Johnson. The two had crossed paths back in the 40s, and as Malcolm became the prominent civil rights activist, which garnered more enemies, Malcolm needed Bumpy's help, which can explain why Malcolm and Bumpy maintained their relationship for so long, despite Bumpy's bumpy path. And it's understandable because Bumpy Johnson was indeed the godfather of Harlem, and anything that happened in the crime world in his neighborhood had to get the stamp of his approval first. If you didn't check in with Bumpy, you'll pay the price indeed. One of Bumpy's rivals named Rollins was spotted in his neighborhood, and Bumpy pulled out a knife and jumped on him, and the two men rolled over as Bumpy stood up, straightening his tie. Rollins remained on the floor with his face and body badly gashed and one of the eyeballs hanging from his sockets by ligaments. But Bumpy had a soft side, and his relationship with Malcolm X helped bring that out of him. Bumpy helped impoverished communities in the neighborhood and delivered gifts and meals to his neighbors and taught younger generations to focus on academics rather than crime. Bumpy Johnson was connected to some fighters in the boxing community, such as Billy Johnson and Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray opened up his own restaurant in Harlem on 7th Avenue and 124th Street. Sugar Ray was one of the first high-profile black figures to invest in property in Harlem, starting his own business. There's even a theory that Bumpy Johnson gave Joe Louis some work after he was struggling post his boxing career. There's even a theory of Ali meeting Bumpy Johnson through Malcolm X while Ali was in training. With Malcolm X being very vulnerable after his split with the nation and with the FBI deeming him a threat, Malcolm requested security from Bumpy Johnson, and with Bumpy Johnson taking a liking to Malcolm, he granted him protection. However, with Bumpy Johnson and Malcolm X going in two completely different directions, Malcolm decided to stop using his support, a decision that would cost the great Malcolm X his life. After giving a speech in Manhattan, he and his wife, along with his 4 daughters, were forced to abandon their home in the middle of the night after it was firebombed. And a few weeks later after that, Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21st, 1965, while speaking at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, New York. 3 members of the Nation of Islam was arrested for his murder, 2 of whom were exonerated on November 2021. These fellows were paid $36 million for spending over 2 decades in prison after being wrongly accused of Malcolm's death. Elijah Muhammad told the Savings Day Convention that Malcolm got what he preached, but denied any involvement in the murder. What most people don't know is that Muhammad Ali's apartment was set on fire by unidentified arsonists the same day Malcolm X was killed. Ali took it as a message to stay in line. Ali would go on to regret turning his back on his brother Malcolm. Ali said, and I quote, "Turning my back on Malcolm was one of the mistakes I regret most in my life," he wrote in his autobiography. "I wish I'd been able to tell Malcolm I was sorry and that he was right about so many things, but he was killed before I got the chance. There will be no reconciliation between the boxer and the man who became his mentor as he joined the Nation of Islam and stood by his side as he rejected his slave master's name, Cassius Clay." Muhammad Ali will continue adding to his legacy as being arguably the greatest boxer of all time. His fight with Joe Frazier will go on to be hyped as the fight of the century. But what made that fight special was that you had 2 African Americans at the top of the sport, old friends that had become rivals and who followed different religions. As we stated earlier in this video, it was only 4 years prior to this fight that Ali turned down being drafted due to his religious beliefs and being unable to fight for 3 years. Ali became more than just an athlete heading down this stage of his career. He was an activist, whether he liked it or not. Joe Frazier was a known devoted Christian, and during the build-up of the fight, Ali would label Joe Frazier as an Uncle Tom, essentially portraying the narrative that Joe Frazier was a tool for white America. Now obviously, it was Ali playing the villain role because Frazier was the one who came forward to help him during that stretch where he was struggling to make ends meet with his boxing license being suspended. But Ali's words were very impactful because it was only 1 year prior to this matchup in which Fred Hampton, chairman of the Black Panther Party, was murdered in his bed by a Chicago police raid. The police was alerted about the apartment structure by a black FBI informant. Frazier, being classified as an Uncle Tom, made him very angry, deservingly so. During the fight on March 8, 1971, the world stopped to watch Ali versus Frazier, which brought in 45 million in ticket sales and was viewed by 300 million people. The fight lived up to the hype as Ali took control early, but began to run out of gas by the 6th round, weakened by the long layoff and by Frazier's punches. In round 15, Ali started talking smack, in which Frazier responded by saying, "You gonna get your ass whooped tonight." Frazier dipped and launched a left hook that caught Ali right on the jaw, sending him to the canvas. Ali did get up, but the knockdown ended up being the difference in the fight, as Frazier won the battle, but Ali won the war, going on to win the next 2 fights of the series, including what was known to be as one of the greatest fights of all time, Thriller in Manila. But yet, despite their long history and their once-upon-a-time friendship, Ali never reconciled with Frazier, similar to how Ali wasn't able to reconcile with Malcolm. Ali was far from perfect. However, his impact in the world transcended some of his shortcomings. Prior to the Rumble in the Jungle of 1974, Ali had already visited Africa back in the 60s. After his trip to Ghana, Ali said, "I am glad to tell our people that there are more things to be seen in Africa than lions and elephants." Thousands were on hand to welcome Ali at the airports as his popularity in the motherland grew. That was evident in his return to Africa for the fight against George Foreman, in which he had the crowd on his side, yelling, "Boombaye, Ali, Boombaye, Ali." Similar to the Sonny Liston fight, Ali was once again defying the odds against the heavyweight hitter, Foreman. With the debut of his rope-a-dope strategy, he was able to KO Foreman in the 8th round. Not only was Ali one of the greatest boxers of all time, he was the most impactful athlete in sports history. When Ali turned down the draft in 1966 due to his fate, one could argue that it was the start of the athlete empowerment era. A year later, in 1967, Joe Brown assembled a meeting of black athletes to support Ali. In 1968, Tommy Smith and John Carlos staged a human rights demonstration on the victory stand at the Mexico City Games. In 1969, after the Major League Baseball season, St. Louis Cardinals player Curt Flood refused a trade which was never seen in baseball before. Abdul Waif was having one of the best seasons of his NBA career when he was suspended by the league in March of 1996 for refusing to stand for the anthem and flag. Then, as an alternative, proceeded to stand but chose to pray instead of putting his hand over his heart. Abdul was also Muslim. 2 decades later, Colin Kaepernick in the NFL knelt during the national anthem in 2016, citing civil unrest as the reason for doing so. Colin was ridiculed and eventually kicked out of the league because of his demonstrations. Kyrie Irving essentially gave up a 4-year, $100 million contract to be unvaccinated and had to sit out Brooklyn Nets home games because of the mandate. All these trade requests or political statements we see in today's sports is an extension from the stance Ali took in 1966. Most recently, Gervonta Davis, who arguably is the face of boxing today, changed his name to Abdul Wahid, announcing his conversion to Islam. Clearly, Islam is not only the second largest religion in the world, but is the fastest growing religion in the world. And clearly, religion has impacted the sports landscape as much as it has impacted the world.